Performing Magic and Mentalism for Persons with Autism. Chapter 4. Steps for preparing to perform magic and mentalism to persons with autism. My name is Mark Bruner. When performing magic or mentalism tricks for individuals with autism, it's essential to approach the performance with sensitivity, but also with an understanding of their unique or potentially unique perspectives. And here are some thoughts on how to create a positive and engaging experience. Step 1, the most important, educate yourself. Whenever possible, learn as much as you can in advance about the autistic person or autistic persons who will be in your audience. Now, I recognize this is not always possible, but if you are told or you know that persons on the autism spectrum will be in an audience at your show, reach out when appropriate, however appropriate, to whomever appropriate, to learn what you can about individual sensitivities and comfort levels. This is especially important with younger audience participants. Parents or guardians will usually be very willing to share information if you are respectful and you explain to them that you are asking questions for the sole purpose of preparing to deliver an enjoyable experience for their child. Now, don't be surprised if you in turn are asked a lot of questions. Concerned parents, concerned guardians may ask you for details about what you intend to present, how you intend to present it. Do you play a character? Is it funny? Is it serious? Is it frightening? Be prepared to answer those questions and answer honestly, because this is a dialogue that can be very valuable in shaping an effective performance. Now, if an adult or adults on the autistic spectrum will be in your audience, it may actually be more challenging to gain pre-show knowledge. But in instances where you are hired or asked by a third party to perform, the organizer of the show might serve as an intermediary to provide helpful input, or perhaps even enable you to communicate verbally or in writing with the actual participants. And then you can begin to learn things that you need to know about them. If performing for an organization or an institution where the entire audience is on the autism spectrum, and I'll discuss these opportunities later because they exist literally in every community of any size, consider providing the organizers a short survey that will give you a better sense of what participants are interested in. This could be as simple as, what is your favorite TV show or movie, or what are the favorite TV shows or movies of the individuals in this particular audience? Favorite cartoon character, favorite toys. You'll discover that often, not always, but often, there will be a similarity of answers, and those answers can enable you to customize your performance for a much more amplified wow factor. Remember that many persons with autism have very strong interests. By strong, I mean intense. They'll become fascinated by something and will want to know and learn everything about that particular interest. So if you can learn about these special personal interests, you can sometimes incorporate elements related to those topics. By that I mean using characters, using objects or props or themes that certain individuals in your audience like and are extremely interested in. This will definitely make your performances much more meaningful. Now, all of this is added work on your part. But because of the wide range of sensitivities represented by the autistic spectrum, knowledge of your audience is simply the key way to properly preparing for an effective show. Step 2, be sensitive to sensitivities. What's meant by that is performing or preparing a performance requires an understanding of individual preferences and comfort levels of persons on the autistic spectrum. Don't forget that the spectrum is wide and it's varied. No autistic person is exactly the same as any other. Therefore, the following input should be perceived as guidelines, not black and white, ironclad rules, but guidelines for proper preparation to perform magic and mentalism. Sensitivities. Many persons with autism have heightened sensitivities to the sensory stimuli of sound, of sight, of smell, of touch. Excuse me. Because of that, magic effects that feature loud sounds, sudden or dramatically repeated movements, or overly bright lights, these things may cause discomfort, or they could even cause panic. Sometimes preparing your audience in advance for these types of stimulation will enable persons on the autism spectrum to anticipate that this might happen, and they'll consequently be better able to cope with what is about to occur. Now, obviously, with magic routines, providing advance notice of what's going to happen is not always possible. It can diminish the effectiveness of a performance. So there's a fine balance here. But for most performers, a magic performance cannot be restructured entirely to accommodate the needs of one or several out of many. All I'm saying is that knowing in advance that loud noises, for example, extremely loud music, sudden noises might be a problem, will enable you as a performer in some instances to give a heads up without compromising the impact of your intended effect. As always, just be aware of potential sensitivities. Mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness is the way of shaping your performance that everybody in your audience can enjoy. Social interaction. In any magic show, there are some participants who are hoping to be interactive. They want to get up on stage. There are others who are dreading the possibility of being called up on stage. Now, autistic participants are no different except in terms of magnitude. They can be significantly different in terms of magnitude. That is to say, some persons on the spectrum may be or will be terrified, not just nervous, but terrified by the prospect of standing up and doing something in front of other people. Even what seems simple to neurologically typical people, such as answering an easy question in a public forum or picking one card, these things can be very intimidating. Social interactions can be a challenge. They can be problematic. Some individuals with autism will be typically very quiet, minimally interactive. Some will not be interactive at all. Some won't even be looking at you. Some will not want to be touched. Now, conversely, others may enjoy participating in general, or because, as we talked about earlier, something in particular has triggered their personal interest. So again, as much as you can, exploring those potential interests in advance can be of help to all. During actual performances, you'll need to carefully gauge the social comfort zone of those in your audience. As a general rule of thumb, though, invite rather than demand. I'll say it again. Invite rather than demand. Do not use jokes or pressure to cause someone to participate. If you sense reluctance, back off. Back off immediately. If an autistic person does choose to participate, be extra respectful of personal space. Ask before touching. Again, ask before touching. Don't confine people. Do not cause them to do anything physically that your participant seems reluctant to do. Distractions and sensory overload. Some persons on the spectrum experience sensory overload even when they're having a great time. And that might manifest itself in an autistic audience participant getting up suddenly and leaving, walking out the door. That is not necessarily a sign of a performer doing something wrong. In fact, it might be that you've done everything right. It might simply be that at a certain point, that individual has reached an overload and a change of environment is necessary. So don't take those things personally. Try to minimize visual distractions. Again, not always easy with a Magic or Mentalism show, but bear it in mind. I would suggest keeping your performance space uncluttered, keeping it as free as you can of too many stimuli, too many things to look at. This allows autistic persons to focus directly on the effect that you're dealing with without feeling overwhelmed. And also realize that distractions can occur in somewhat unusual ways. I'll give you an example. I've had a young man on the spectrum become so fascinated by one of my props. It was a wooden hand that you could move the fingers on. Became so fascinated with that wooden hand that he couldn't focus on anything else. I literally had to give him the hand in order to continue with the show. Once he had the hand, everything was fine. Don't treat those kinds of occurrences, if they happen, as a distraction. Treat them instead as signs of engagement. You've accomplished a connection. It may be a different kind of connection than you expected, but it is a connection. Use it. That engagement may manifest itself in ways that are very much different from the reaction of neurotypical individuals. But as I say, when they occur, be glad of them. It's a sign that you're doing something that is being assimilated. So you're doing something right. Step 3, be mindful. Above all, remember that autism does not suggest diminished mental capacity. Autism has nothing to do with intelligence. Folks on the spectrum are as diverse as any other human beings, and in fact can be and are remarkably brilliant in many, many ways. Autism doesn't suggest a lack of intellectual ability. It simply means that the active mind sees the world in ways that are a bit different than those who are neurologically typical. Now, because persons with autism are so diverse, the next comments that I'm going to make are guidelines for performing magic that are not ironclad facts that will apply to each and every autistic audience member, but they are characteristics that manifest themselves with enough regularity that they can be used as rules of thumb for performing magic and mentalism to persons on the autism spectrum. The first is keep communications clear and simple. This is not because persons with autism are less intelligent. It is because many persons on the autism spectrum are very literal. I'll use this is a very overly simplified example. To a neurologically typical person, the statement, "This is really hot. This is really a hot magic trick. This is really a hot magic trick," is automatically understood to mean that the trick is great, that it's going to amaze people, it's going to impress people because it's so mystifying and clever. An autistic person, however, is apt to translate the specific word hot in a completely literal sense, meaning or concluding that the trick will somehow involve fire, could involve burning, could involve heat. Now, this example is extreme, but it's not out of the realm. It points to the need for expressing narrative, pattern, and instructions in a very clear and concise language that avoids complexities, that avoids metaphors, that avoids slang. So you need to review your narrative process in that regard. Some persons on the autism spectrum also are highly sequential in their thought processes. One thing, one step after another, very routine, very sequential. So effects that provide a step-by-step structure may be much easier to follow and consequently much more appreciated. Also, because individuals with autism they're processing information from your world into theirs. Be patient. Avoid rushing through explanations. Take your time with instructions, and also don't expect immediate responses. Sometimes there is going to be a lag time while this process takes place. Let it happen. Don't push it. Secondly, be visual. Many persons with autism are highly visual thinkers. They see things in terms of pictures and images as opposed to words. Magic tricks that are visually clear and engaging, such as sleight of hand, visual illusions, object transformations, can be particularly captivating. Third, make predictability work for you. Some persons with autism find comfort in routines, sometimes very strict routines. If you're performing multiple tricks, it might be helpful to explain or preview the structure of the performance, not to preview the reveal or to preview the result, but to kind of give a little explanation about what's going to happen. This can reduce anxiety and help them feel more engaged in what's about to occur. Next, use nonverbal communications, but use them judiciously. Some persons with autism are more attuned to nonverbal cues than verbal cues. So when appropriate, consider using exaggerated, clear body language to enhance the trick. Also, consider the tone, your tone and your facial expressions. Keep a friendly, calm, positive demeanor throughout your performance, using facial expressions to convey enjoyment and engagement. This, again, may be a challenge to those of you who play a character, but it's something to keep in mind. And one comment of caution. Magic tricks sometimes rely on misdirection and social cues to distract the audience from what's really happening. And some individuals with autism may struggle with interpreting those social cues or nonverbal communications, which normally could make them more susceptible to being misdirected in certain tricks. And I'll give you an example. If the trick relies on manipulating social expectations, it may be challenging for persons with autism who don't naturally follow those cues to decode the cues that you're giving. And my example would be, say for example, you are pretending to be angry because something seems to be going wrong with your trick, when of course it's really going according to plan, and that's the whole process. Your nonverbal cue, your nonverbal look of annoyance or anger, sends a specific social coded message that a neurotypical person usually is pretty quick to understand. They say, yeah, the magician is faking this, something fun or, funny or is going to happen. Everything is going to work out all right. But it could be very confusing to a person with autism because there is not a direct relationship to other stimuli. This is just an example, but again, something to keep in mind. The next rule of thumb: provide a sense of control. Insofar as you can, allow your participants with autism to participate directly in making decisions during the performance. Again, if this depends, of course, on their willingness and comfort level to do this, but even simple things as choosing a card or deciding which object to use are things that can enhance the engagement. It's also a way of helping them feel more comfortable. The next rule of thumb, extremely important one, but it has several wrinkles to it: positive reinforcement. Encourage and celebrate. Encourage and celebrate. Celebrate the presence of the persons with autism, whether they participate or observe or don't do anything, don't even look at you. Use positive reinforcement to make the experience enjoyable, but be somewhat mindful about overpraising, which actually can become overwhelming for some persons on the autism spectrum. I know of one young man, for example, who does not like to be told you did a good job. He doesn't like to hear the phrase, "I'm proud of you." However, he does appreciate being told, "I'm impressed by what you did." Now, those, of course, are subtleties that you may never know about prior to a performance, but sometimes you will if you follow the path discussed earlier of trying to educate yourself about the specific audience members that you have, insofar as that you can. But all of this does suggest that a simple smile, a simple nod of the head, or a thumbs up can be a great positive reinforcement versus a barrage of flowery words. As an added way of making the magic experience magical, you might consider inviting your audience to remain for a few minutes after each show and ask questions. Interact with them on a different level. Within reason, you might gain a deeper level of interest by allowing persons with autism to respectfully touch and feel your selected props. You can set the guidelines, you can set the boundaries, but this gives them the sensation of having been a real part of the show. In tandem with positive reinforcement, the final rule of thumb that I'll offer is that of accepting reality. Some persons with autism might find magic tricks frustrating if they don't understand how the trick actually works. They may, because of who they are, perform or prefer more concrete, logical experiences. Now, while some individuals with autism excel at thinking logically, others might have more rigid thinking patterns that make it difficult or challenging for them to accept the quote-unquote impossible aspects of magic. Magic tricks often defy that everyday logic or the solvable patterns, and that, to some folks, is going to be a contradiction It may be an intriguing contradiction, or it might be a frustrating contradiction for some who prefer clear or concrete answers. So what I'm getting at there is that, you, in this sense, is probably no different than a neurotypical audience where some people just don't like magic. Magicians and mentalists have to live with that fact that some people don't. It's going to be the same with people with autism. Some are just not going to like it. Don't take it personally. Simply a reality that you can't change. Do your best. Do not take a negative reaction or a failure or a commentary on your performance. Persons with autism can be very blunt, very honest, very genuine. You'll hear things from them. Some of them you probably wish you didn't hear. It will happen, but it happens with neurologically typical audience members too. It's just that their responses may not be as noticeable.